I'm David Montgomery. I'm a Presbyterian minister in Belfast. I am wholeheartedly Protestant in my theology. I'm evangelical, born again, Bible-believing, all the epithets that people would want to use to check my Protestant soundness. I adhere to all of those. But I cannot make the connection that says that demands of me a commitment to an ongoing union. Surrendering myself to the authority of Christ and Scripture has led me personally to a political nationalism, which means that I want to see this island united under Christ for the sake of the gospel. When I drive around Belfast and see graffiti that says "One faith, one crown," I have to ask myself, what are they saying? Is it the crown of Jesus Christ? No, it's not. It's the crown of the British monarchy. Now, in what way are the activities of the current royal family, particularly the junior members of that family, bolstering up the faith?
This is Talkback. I have on the line now David Montgomery. Would you be regarded as, and I've got to put this very bluntly to you, a bit of a traitor?
I've no doubt that many would see me as that there may be a traitor to unionism, but that's simply me changing my political preference, and
yes,
that's what I, as a Presbyterian and a right of conscience, I believe I have the right to do that.
When I was speaking on the Talkback programme, there was an element of what will people think of this? But my philosophy of ministry is that if you're true to Scripture, then you have nothing to fear. And if people want to open the Bible and show me where I am wrong, then I'm willing to accept that. The Presbyterian Church is a church of great diversity. I'm part of that diversity. Many of my colleagues at Union College, for example, would not share my political perspective. I am willing to accept a united Ireland if it will lead to Ireland being united spiritually under Christ. Now, how would you respond to that possibility?
I don't believe that the barrier is just as clearly cut as a nationalist, unionist split, but more of a racial split. As one colleague said, that when he went into a nationalist area, he felt as though he'd been parachuted into another country.
One thing which made it clear to me that we have nothing to fear from the south of Ireland was my own experience living in Dublin, and primarily through meeting my wife there, marrying into a southern Protestant family. I began to understand that they lived perfectly happily in that environment, and that there is nothing to fear from the Irish Republic.
I've been a Protestant Irish woman all my life, and I'm very comfortable with that. For me, my Presbyterian faith didn't come with any political baggage. I felt free to be me, an Irish woman. And it wasn't until I met some Presbyterians from Northern Ireland that I discovered that they carried a lot of unionist and political baggage, but I've never felt that that has to be part of my faith.
As long as there is a border on this map, inevitably and subconsciously there will be borders in people's minds and borders in people's hearts. I believe the Presbyterian Church has a role in the whole of this island, and that the monopoly experienced by the Roman Catholic Church over the years, again, has ill-served the country. Now, if that is the case, I have to ask questions. What am I prepared to sacrifice in order to bring that about? And one of the first things I was prepared to sacrifice was my unionism and the existence of that border.
I'm Laurence Moffat. I was brought up in the Presbyterian community in Crossgar, and I went to church and Sunday school in the Sarah Presbyterian Church here in the square, which when I was very young was the focus of the village for me. I've always thought since I was a teenager, let's say 16, 18-year-old, that community should not be the deciding factor in your politics. And having that outlook, I joined a number of years ago, 10 years ago in fact, the SDLP, and for the last year I've been a member of the executive of the SDLP. I joined the SDLP in fact in December 1985 after the signing of the Anglo-Irish Agreement. The SDLP for me is a party that rose out of the civil rights movement. I would say that it's not a Catholic party, that it's a party of reform and a party that is social democratic in its policies and its outlook. And the fact that the majority of members are Catholics, which of course is true, is irrelevant. What you have to do is judge it on its policies. Crossgar is a small village where sectarian passions are often barely noticeable. In terms of the religious community here, the Catholic community would be the biggest Christian denomination, followed by the Presbyterian community. There's also a Free Presbyterian community. In fact, the first Free Presbyterian church that Dr. Paisley had is in Crossgar, was built in 1951. There's also a Passionist monastery here, which opened after the Second World War. So in terms of religion, the village is roughly half and half.
The gunman entered the shop and fired several shots at a man working there.
Trefford Wells, of course, was the last person who was murdered by the IRA. He was killed on August the 7th to the 8th last year, and he was somebody that I knew very well when I was a teenager. We played cricket together, we hung around together, we chatted up young ladies together. When those sorts of things happen, people ask questions, you know, who was watching him, who was starting out, making sure the police weren't about, making sure the army weren't about. So it creates suspicion, it increases distrust, and it creates divisions between both communities. I saw the handshaking as saying Sinn Féin was now part of the political process, and Gerry Adams in shaking hands was saying, yes, we are now part of the political process, we have rejected paramilitarism. There is no pan-nationalist front in my opinion. A pan-nationalist front to me would mean that we were working to a united strategy with Sinn Féin, and I don't see that happening at all. I see Sinn Féin and the IRA as part of an older tradition based on Defenderism. The Defenders were a Catholic rural faction in the 1700s in this part of Ireland, the northern part of Ireland, who fought Protestant factions like the Peep a Day Boys. And I would see Sinn Féin as being closer to Defenderism than they are to United Irishmen. And I would see Sinn Féin as retaining essentially a sectarian, inward-looking anti-Protestantism. I see David Trimble as someone, to be quite honest about it, who was a member of the Vanguard Unionism. And Vanguard Unionism existed and was quite important for a number of years in the 70s. It was a thoroughly unpleasant manifestation because it was surrounded by the trappings and rhetoric of fascism, really. This is just a link that the Orange Order has had with the Ulster Unionist Party. I think, to some extent, has actually controlled the worst passions of Protestant and Loyalist extremism. In other words, the Orange Order as an organisation, in fact, has probably acted as a benign influence within the Protestant community. I'm not actually a person who goes along with this assumption that if you separate the Orange Order from the Ulster Unionist Party, you actually get a more friendly Unionist Party. You in fact may get a Unionist Party which is more like the DUP. I don't see myself as a token member of the Protestant community within the SDLP. I would argue that my analysis doesn't require that I reject anything of myself in terms of my background within the Presbyterian community. I believe the proposals that the party have put forward are in the interests of both communities and in the interests of everyone.
My name's Robbie McVeigh. This is my mother's farm, which is 47 acres of land in the Strudel Valley in Tyrone. And I grew up on this farm, but my mother is essentially the farmer here. I would come back every now and again to lend her a hand if she's making hay or whatever, but she's the person who runs the farm.
Sage is a pre-novice eventer. This is a 2-year-old who's will be broken next summer, and that's the old eventer up on the top of the hill.
Now, the tradition that I grew up in around here was essentially a liberal Protestant Unionist tradition, And until I left the farm at the age of 18, I certainly had never seen myself as anything other than British. Now, it was only in the context of having my Irishness given to me, if you like, by living and working in England, that I realised that whatever I wanted, there was no way that I could be British. I came face to face with an anti-Irish racism that said to me, whatever you want, there's no place for you inside the Britishness that most English people work with. Order! Order! I went down to the Houses of Parliament during the debate around the Anglo-Irish Agreement, and I heard people, Ulster politicians, Unionist politicians like Harold McCusker, making very powerful speeches, and their rhetoric was about principle and sacrifice, and talking about the Somme and the commitment that the Unionist people had made to the Empire and to Britain. And in response to that, I heard them being laughed at, and they weren't being laughed at by left-wing Labour MPs. They were being laughed at by this new breed of Tories. Gavin! Gavin! If you looked at my kind of experiences in London, you know, the kind of world that I came from was completely different to the world that I went to, and in some ways that juxtaposition or contrast between Britishness and Irishness was plain in itself. That was enough to say, well, you have to make sense of yourself as Irish, because clearly your notion of Britishness doesn't fit in with the Britishness you're experiencing across the water. So in that way, I don't think that Protestants who decide that they want to be Irish go out and learn how to be Irish. What they do is begin to look at aspects of their own history, of their own culture, of their own identity in a different way. King Billy, the Battle of the Boyne, the Orange Order, none of those were symbols that I ever wanted to identify with as an Irish Protestant. I had to look to a different tradition to try and situate myself in terms of something that I wanted to see as more radical, more progressive, and yet linking into a sense of Protestant history in the island. And I find it, beginning at least in the United Irish movement, which of course was founded mostly by Ulster Protestants, and yet was committed to democracy, non-sectarianism, progressive politics on the island of Ireland. And the kind of message that they developed over 200 years ago now, I think still raises questions for us today about the kind of island that we want to live in. Is it an island that's divided, that is sectarian, or is it an island that still aspires to the kind of identity that was there, that was promised, and the kind of notions of Irishness and democracy that were first founded in the United Irish movement? These days I work with CRD, which looks at the links between Ireland and the so-called third world, the majority world. Now, as a Protestant person, it's clearly important to me to come to terms with my own sense of where I'm at the present in terms of that history. And I do think that there's a particular crisis around Protestant identity, and part of that crisis is the fact that we haven't been able to examine our own history and how we fitted into the broader process of colonisation here and around the world. Wherever I go here, talking to Loyalists, to Unionists, Protestants of all different backgrounds, the one thing that's clear in terms of everybody is that they think that there's inevitability to United Ireland, and there's this, enormous despondency in some ways because of that. And my own feeling about that is that if it is inevitable, then the bottom line is that you have to go with the white South African option. You have to say, if it's definitely coming, then for God's sake, get in there and fight your corner and manage and make sure you get the best deal possible, rather than being dragged into a situation in which you're delivered up to the rest of Ireland by the machinations of the British government and the disinterest of the British